Welcome back to PD for the Soul, the podcast that nourishes the heart of your practice one episode at a time. I'm your host, Lanisha, and you've made it to season 2. Whether you're catching your breath after a long school year, reflecting on what worked and what didn't, or already dreaming up ways to re-engage with joy and purpose, this space is for you, my friend. This season, we're leaning into capacity in action, what it means to build, protect, and sustain the energy and clarity needed to show up fully for our students and ourselves. Can't forget about that part. You will hear honest conversations with educators who are doing the work, solo episodes that connect practice to purpose, and journal prompts designed to help you move from insight to impact. So if you're ready to reset, reconnect, and reimagine what's possible for your students and your own growth, let's breathe, let's listen, and let's learn together. This is PD for the Soul. Let's begin. Welcome back to PD for the Soul, the podcast where we nurture the heart and sharpen the craft of teaching. Today's conversation is all about one of the most powerful forces in education, capacity building. I'm joined by a very special guest known as the capacity expert to unpack what it really means to build sustainable, lasting growth in teachers. We'll talk about what capacity building is, the biggest barriers that stand in the way, and the small but powerful mindset shifts that can make a huge difference. Whether you're a classroom teacher, an instructional coach, or a school leader, this episode will give you practical strategies to help yourself and others move from surviving to thriving. So let's jump in. Raquel, please introduce yourself to the people.
Well, hello there. Thank you for having me. Like I was saying before we officially started, I'm excited to be able to offer my support to educators. I think that what they do is very important. I two children. I completely appreciate them. I feel like they're your kids and they're my kids. So I'm glad that I get to give back in that way. But I am Raquel Hopkins, capacity expert. I refer to myself as a capacity expert. I am LPC, so licensed professional counselor here in the state of Texas. I'm also a professional certified coach, and I also have a background in HR. So fairly new to the mental health space within the last 5 years or so. And within the last year or so, I've started to create content around, I wouldn't say my philosophy of mental health, but more so how I understood mental health when I went into the program. So at the time, I was working as VP of HR for a global telecommunications company. Already had one master's, I had my MBA, and then unfulfilled, similar to what you were saying, how you came out of accounting. I was like, the money is good, the benefits are great, but just something really feels off to me. And I ended up going into a coaching program. And I always tell people that when I can't figure out my life, if you catch me back in school and it's not like a CEU, like I have educrastination. That means I'm lost, I'm stuck, I'm still trying to find my way. So I go back and get the second master's. And as I'm listening to the information that I am taking in and also reading the textbook, I'm like, this isn't the way that I am understanding mental health in terms of how it's being presented and what I see out in mainstream media. And I was also finding like, I was like, all right, I'm married, I'm already mom of one, working at the executive level. Like I'm pretty good at coping. Like black girl too. I'm like, I'm already good at coping. Like I know how to do this. I need something else. And that needing and wanting something else led me to dive into adult development and just become a little bit more curious in terms of what does it take to actually thrive? What does it take to meet the demands that we all face today, like living in this modern day world that we haven't always known? So that's just a little background.
I appreciate you providing us with that introduction. You call yourself again the capacity expert. So I want to understand what that means in the context of education, especially for teachers, which are majority of my listeners.
Well, what that would mean in your space is that one, acknowledging that that system and how teachers support and care for students, work with their parents, means that skills that may have worked 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, right? Like it doesn't necessarily apply anymore. And people have to be willing to pivot to become more than what they have done in the past. And I know that it probably was like, oh gosh, I'm already giving a whole lot. But it's not so much about like the responsibility that you're carrying, is learning how to carry your responsibility differently, because kids are now exposed to, they have social media, they have language that we haven't had before. When we talk about like labeling themselves with anxiety, whatever it may be, right? Those things are not necessarily normal, but they're becoming the norm. And if they are becoming the norm, how do you get ahead of it, in a sense, in terms of understanding what mental health is, so that you don't feel like you're at the expense or at the effect of parents saying, well, you don't understand my child, and you seeing the child every day and you're like, well, they're still capable, right? And that's where capacity comes in. When we talk about your industry, like nothing is the same. Parents are helicopter parents. Parents are wanting to make sure that their children have the best, and wanting to make sure that they protect their mental health. And in the process, they may not be building their kids, setting them up for the future. So that's where capacity comes in for people within the education space.
So one thing that you mentioned that just sparked something for me, you said students have access to different language than we may have had access to as children. And it made me think about a student several weeks ago who said, I'm just overstimulated. And they were, at that point in time, we were working on an assignment and they wanted to give up. Hadn't really even gotten to the assignment yet, but they were overstimulated and they did some type of like dramatic movement with their body. And then it was like, I'm done. Like I just need a moment. And I'm interested to hear from you. Obviously, we have social media right at our fingertips. We have all this stuff that they're consuming. Why do you think that students are so much more open to these labels? When I feel like when I was a kid, nobody really wanted to be labeled in that way.
Yeah. No one wanted to be labeled. I think that the labeling is that's a great question, by the way. I think that the labeling is one thing, right? The other part of that is your feelings are valid today, right? And that's a slippery slope, because your feelings are not facts, right? They're fleeting. They are temporary. They are something that you're reacting to in the moment. They have the ability to disappear too. So you could be feeling overstimulated in this moment based off of what you are being faced with. But if you don't necessarily challenge those feelings, it can become a weapon to educators, for example, because now I'm weaponizing how I feel, because it's important to listen to how people feel, right? And in the process of listening to how people feel, it dismisses accountability for whatever your responsibility is in that moment.
Mm. Okay, so thinking about that among some of the other things that I guess are involved in capacity building, what are some of the biggest barriers to teachers' capacity building, and how can schools and leaders help remove those barriers?
I would say the biggest barrier is professional and personal development. I'm not in the education space, so I don't know what that has looked like over time. Is that just rooted in curriculum and, making sure students passed? For us, it's the STAR test. Growing up in Virginia, it was the SOL test. Is it that, or do we focus on like soft skills for teachers? Do we focus on how to build self-trust when there's so much uncertainty? When you think about like how organizations start positioning their leaders, I don't know that educators are doing the same thing. And I don't know, because I'm not in the industry, right? So I don't know. But I think that it starts with that, like the training and development that is offered to people within that space.
I think you are hitting the nail on the head. Lately I've been thinking about all that we're doing within districts to support teachers, from the professional development, from the coaching. but it doesn't seem like it really is centered on teaching. Like the goal is the students and the student outcomes, but in
Mm,
order for us to get those outcomes, we really got to build up the teacher. So I'm
yep.
listening to the soft skills pieces that you are talking about, and I'm also reflecting on what's taking place in my district. So it is professional development on the curriculum, it is professional development on instructional routines, it is professional development on, in some cases, building community in your classroom, like classroom management related things. But in terms of the growth mindset that we need to have within the teachers, I don't
Mhm,
know if we have enough of that. Like, it's how can we create that in the students? But before I can even do that in the students, I got to take care of like myself. Is kind of how I
mhm.
think about it. And I don't know if there is enough of that. So I know that many teachers feel overwhelmed. We see that on social media. I hear that every day. Now, I want to ask, what mindset shifts or habits help teachers to build the capacity to do their work more effectively?
First one, I always say, if you see your responsibility as a burden, and by responsibility, it's the new responsibility, right? Today, what you're juggling is no longer what teachers may have had to juggle in the past, right? Today, you are juggling parents' mental health, kids' mental health, your children' mental health, if you have it, all while doing what's listed in the job description. And there are these intangible things that are not necessarily listed in that job description that people don't realize end up creating an emotional and a mental weight and or load in a way to where they just feel like they're just going with the motions, right? Like people are showing up, but there ends up being an emotional and a mental load that educators, I would say, is carrying because so much of their jobs and their roles have changed. Like when I would imagine when you come into the education space, you expect to be able to work with kids, teach kids, focus on passing, but that's not the job description anymore. Like that's not the job description anymore. It's almost like if you think about it from a mental health professional, to some degree, you don't know if you're going to get a client that's going to come in and have suicidal thoughts, right? But you expect that because that's your industry. You expect uncertainty. You expect people to be crying. And I think that teachers are all dealing with all of those things now. I was listening to a school leader recently, like his intuition. Well, I wasn't, someone was telling me a story, but his intuition told him that a student had a gun on him. And he went up to the student to say like, hey, and like kind of like, checking in, like, this is not what you want, right? And I think that that doesn't matter because I used to think that it was about like the school district that you were in. I don't think it matters today. School shootings, right? Like you have to think about protecting your kids. Like it's a lot has changed.
Mhm. I would agree with that. And when I'm thinking about providing the support for teachers with so much having changed and shifted, people going into the industry and maybe they had one idea of what to expect, and maybe that is completely different whenever they actually get into the classroom. I think social media kind of makes it a little bit more real and kind of gives you a little taste of it before you get in, because there's so many people talking about education. And unfortunately, I feel like a lot of the conversation tends to be pretty negative, which I think impacts how people show up to work and things
Hmm.
like that as
Hmm.
well. So my role as a coach, I'm supporting teachers, and I share with you before we started recording that my word for this year, especially for next school year, is just about building capacity. One thing that I know was not necessarily my strength in these first couple years as a coach was building the capacity of my teachers. Like, I thought that I was teaching them or training them things, but I think I was more so showing my level of expertise and they were relying on that. So they were like, okay, Lanisha, this is what I need, get this for me, whatever. Or how should I do this? Or how should I structure this? And I'm right there on it. Like I'm responding. When instead I really should have been kind of coaching them to be able to handle those things on their own, because I'm not always going to be there in that role. So I share this to say, what role do you think coaches play in helping teachers build their capacity?
I love the way you just communicated that, because as a coach, your goal is not to become the space or the go-to for people when they feel like they need an escape or they don't know how to necessarily figure out the how. The goal is to be able to coach. If you, no matter what industry you're in, right? You don't coach to fix things. You don't coach to solve problems. You truly coach because um, there's an end result or solution that you're hoping to get. And in this case, the expertise is going to be there, right? Because that's what you do. That's what they're there for. But the solution is making sure that they don't feel like they have to depend on you. Like, whether you're leaving a mental health professional or you're just putting your kid, you're becoming an empty nester. The goal is to create individuals that feel like they can live life on their own, autonomously and independently from you. Now, that doesn't mean that people won't ever need support, because, community matters, but you want to be able to set people up so that they can fish.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
100%.
hard to do because we just in general as leaders, right, coaches, um we want to fix because it's instant gratification, right? You're providing a solution, you feel like people are winning in the moment, so that long-term value ends up being taken away because the goal is to fix, to solve what's in front of me immediately versus trying to stay rooted in what you're trying to solve long term, which is why I believe my content has went viral, because one, I speak to that inherent need and desire for us to want to grow, but I'm also teaching you to fish. I'm not saying that you don't need support, but I am telling you that pro agency matters. If you get wrapped up on, I like to say, when you get wrapped up in the struggle and your struggle starts to be the main character in this sense, like, oh, teaching is so hard, it's changed so much, blah, 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 blah. Of course, you're not going to be able to move forward in a much more positive or optimistic way, right? Because you're so caught up on the problems or the struggles that come with it. And which is why I say, like, as long as you see responsibility as a burden, it'll never be a catalyst for growth.
As long as you see responsibility as a burden. So, one of the reasons why I fell in love with your page on Instagram is because you said a lot of things that I was thinking, that I said, well, maybe that doesn't make sense, or maybe that's a little too much, or maybe people ain't ready to hear that. But you said it, and I was like, yes, I feel like there's a lot of my colleagues who are using things that they're hearing on
Mental
social
health as a
media,
crutch,
using what as a crutch.
mental health.
Yes, 100%, 100%. Like, I feel like, we're taking these mental health days, or which, again, we need to definitely take care of ourselves. But sometimes I feel
Mm-hmm.
like we use those things as an excuse to avoid the responsibility. And I think that's the challenge that I feel like we are all facing. So I want to get to the point where teachers are taking more ownership, I guess you can say, in their professional growth. And I'm just trying to figure out, how do they do that, even in schools where the support and the resources might be limited? How can they really take ownership of that growth and not use the responsibility to scare themselves away, or as a crutch, as you mentioned earlier?
I'd say the first thing is making sure that we understand what mental health is, right? Most people
Mm-hmm.
think, when they think of mental health, they think of this fragile state. Like, if it is exposed to too much stress, if it experience overwhelm, then you're gonna end up having bad mental health. And that is the complete opposite, right? Your mental health is not fragile. Your mental health is this dynamic state that has the ability to adapt and to grow with you, right? And if people understood mental health from that perspective, how you think, feel, and behave, it's a system. And how you think, feel, and behave should be adjusting and or growing with you as you change, as life changes, as these new demands are presented to you. And if you continue to protect that system, that mental health, how you think, feel, and behave, of course you're not going to have the capacity to engage with life in its fullness, right? Because you don't understand what mental health is. So
Mm,
you end up creating this system that is very fragile and is dependent upon having the right conditions.
mm. I'm glad you said that because it just maybe as you were talking, I thought about a video I saw with former First Lady Michelle Obama. She talked about people have to be okay not being comfortable all the time or not being happy all the time. And I guess complaining because you don't feel that sense of joy or, have that
Mhm.
burst of endorphins or whatever. Just you have to realize that we're not going to be in those moments all the time.
Yep. And for people that believe that way, I can guarantee you they are still the people that probably emotionally suppress.
Mm,
Because if we have this misconception of what mental health is, right? Most people know that it's okay to have like a bad day, right? But overall, people want to feel good. And if you always want to feel good, there's no focus on becoming better, right? Because the goal is always rooted in like the now, right? So people
mm,
get wrapped up into what we will refer to as more of
mm,
the positive emotions, and they're continuing to push away the what, because I don't believe there's such thing as negative emotions, but people tend to suppress those negative emotions because they would prefer to feel better or to have more of those emotions that equate to joy and happiness and contentment and feeling balance, right? Balance is another thing, right? So people are more so searching for those things. Comfort. I always say that mental health is not about comfort. Mental health is about capacity, and growth requires friction. Like it does.
You said we're caught up in the now. And so being caught up in the now prevents us from getting better. So if right now it feels good to me to be sitting on the couch watching TV, then I may not do something that's on my to do list that needs to get done because
Yeah,
right
because
now
I
in the
feel
moment,
good right now,
I feel
right?
good
Like
right
that
now.
level of discipline is not necessarily there. And not to say that you don't have your moments where that's okay, but if we get so wrapped up in your feelings matter, because that was what they say about the prior generation, right? It was just keep pushing, you keep pushing, you keep pushing, you keep pushing. But I think that there's a difference in terms of like enduring life and engaging with life. Like, I don't teach my clients to endure life. Like, I want you to learn to engage with life so that you can truly go with the ebbs and the flows, and you're not constantly feeling like you need a retreat from life. Because that's
Mm.
what ends up happening. Even when they're establishing their boundaries and all of these new things that we're using, I think I was writing something today and I was thinking like boundaries have always been in place. I think about when your mama said, because I say it so. That was a boundary, right? And I think that for how we create boundaries today, it is usually in place of self-trust, right? And I think that when we're talking about educators today, right? Say, let's just say they're creating boundaries, like I'm not gonna do this and I'm not gonna whatever. I don't know what
I'm
educators'
leaving every
boundaries look
day at
like.
2:40. I'm
Yeah,
leaving
okay,
as
I'm
soon as
leaving
that.
every day at 2 4. I'm not
Mhm.
staying behind. I'm not doing any extra work. What tends to happen is you don't trust yourself. And when I say that you don't trust yourself to say, no, I can't do it on Wednesday, but I can do it on Tuesday. Like you're not okay with like the discomfort that may be created by life asking you to lean in a little bit more and trust that you know how to say yes, you know how to say no, you understand what your values are versus retreating altogether. Like that's not a boundary anymore. That's a wall
Mhm.
that you've created, and you're not allowing anything else to come into it, which means that you shut the door to growth.
Mm, mm. Wow. Okay. So I don't trust myself enough to say today I may not be able to stay beyond 2:40, but tomorrow I can, or today I'm going to stay late.
Yeah, because you might try and take advantage of me, right? Like it's all
Mm,
about protection. You may try and take advantage of me. If I say yes to no, I say yes now, and I've already experienced burnout and da 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 da. And now that I have my boundaries, and I'm not saying that some people, because that's the foundation for a lot of people, it's establishing boundaries. But boundaries have also now become a substitute for self-trust. I think that today, I think that we have the most emotionally fragile people that I've seen in my time. That's what I would say. Um, And yeah.
Yeah, I read a book a few months ago. I think it was called The Coddling of the American Mind, and it was really just
Mm,
talking about children and how you mentioned earlier about like helicopter parenting and things like that, but
hmm
just how we are protecting kids from having specific experiences. So then when they do experience things, it's like it's the worst thing ever. And so now they are picketing or they're rallying and they're getting together and they're trying to overthrow things when it's really not that serious. So it's a very interesting book. And what you're saying just reminds me of that. So I want to think about now, like, what are some things that teachers can do to help them, I guess, trust themselves more? Because I mean, everybody loves throwing around that word boundary, but I think sometimes we gray it out, like it's now overused, I think. So then what can we do to learn to trust ourselves more so that we can grow?
I think that it goes back, the first part of it for me is you got to be able to acknowledge how you feel, right? And I say how you feel, if we're using the scenario that you're saying, like I got to leave by 2:40. And let's just say this isn't the person that's just trying to beat the system, or the person that's trying to find out how to go on FMLA. And I'm not referring to that person. I'm referring to the person that really feels like I've given my all to this industry. I love it when I'm here. I'm going to give 100%, but at 2:40, like I'm out of here. I think it's acknowledging that whatever that may be, like there's a fear, right? Like I'm afraid that I may end up burnt out again and I'm not able to show up for my kids and or myself again. And I think that when you're able to be honest about how you truly feel, you allow yourself to one, sit with discomfort, right? Because you can now hold your truth, but it also gives you an opportunity to learn from it or figure out how you should act on it. Because for the person that I'm speaking to right now, you love what you do, right? You love all of the mess that even comes with it. When you're in it, but you're also always looking for an escape, right? I always tell people to identify the roles that you currently carry, right? A lot of us are carrying a lot of different roles. For example, when we talk about teachers, like not just teachers, you're not just educators anymore. You are, in some cases, some kids feel like you're the parent, a mental health advocate, and I mean the role, there are a lot of different roles that people are carrying, and when you are not aware of those roles and it just all defaults to this bucket of teacher, it's easy to feel overwhelmed. So one, be honest about how you're actually feeling. And most people think that they have to know like a chart of a bunch of emotions. No, just use common language to express how you're actually feeling. And from there, that creates the awareness. Because the biggest thing with emotions is when you learn that you can sit with fear, you can sit with anxiety, those are signs of you saying that I can trust myself. And if I can trust myself in these uncomfortable moments, I can trust myself in these other uncomfortable moments. That's why I always tell people that's what makes emotional, knowing how you feel, so important.
Mm, okay. So, what advice would you give to a teacher? So, I'm going to put myself in a teacher's shoes. So, I'm struggling with burnout. I still want to grow in my practice. I actually, you know what? Let's say I'm a teacher who I am newer and I am being influenced by maybe some veteran teachers who have already experienced a burnout. Maybe I haven't experienced a burnout yet, but I am learning from the people that I'm around and they're leaving at 2:40, so I'm also going to leave at 2:40. They are complaining or talking about their boundaries, so I'm also going to talk about my boundaries. They are complaining about maybe the things they're experiencing in relation to the students. So I'm also doing that as well, but I still want to grow. How can I overcome this group think? Because I feel like I am just really being influenced by everybody that's around me. And if I go against the grain, then I'm going to be out here kind of by myself. So, how can I guess, still build these relationships within this group, but still grow in my practice as well without ostracizing myself? That's a loaded
The
question.
only way to sort of disassociate yourself from groupthink is to know what your values are. And if you're a new teacher coming to the industry, you got to remind yourself of why you chose this career. What is it that you're passionate about? Because just like you and I have already talked about, nothing stays the same. So it doesn't mean that you're going to be in the industry or in that profession for 20, 25 years. Nothing stays the same, right? But if you're in it, are you willing to put in? Because if you're not willing to put in, you're not going to get anything out of it. So it's not about running from the industry because of what other people are experiencing. I think that if you don't know who you are, what it is that you value, irrespective of what other people are saying around you, it's always going to be easy to victimize yourself, right?
Mm.
To me, it's no different from, for example, I don't say that I am like I'm a mental health professional, I'm a licensed professional counselor. I root myself in like I am compassion, I am kindness, I am truth, I am courageous, right? Because those are the things that I value. It's less about the title and or the role. Like I am guidance, I am support. I am support is one of the biggest things, right? That's what allows me to continue to do what I do every single day. And I think that so many people are disconnected from self that it's really easy to listen to a lot of the noise in any industry, right? I don't care what industry, because I have an HR background, people are going to tell you that HR is so tired and burnt out today. Educators, nurses are going to tell you, it doesn't matter what industry. Everybody is having to deal with some form of pain and or discomfort. Is not just you. So you got to
Yeah.
understand what your values are. And rather than leading with I am a teacher, like lead with something else.
Mm. Lead with something else. Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, my word or my phrase is build capacity. So if you had to design a capacity building blueprint for teachers or anybody that's listening, whether it be a coach or administrator, what are the top 3 things that would be non-negotiable?
Um I am building it. So it's the emotional capacity is a huge one, right? Because I talk about emotional awareness. I talk about resiliency in the sense of like your recovery time, not just bouncing back because that's survival mode, right? When I think about resiliency, it is, for example, if an educator has a difficult time with a parent that is coddling their child, but the educator knows that this child is capable of more, right? You find yourself in several of those situations. You're not just saying that, oh my gosh, like that exhausted. I was exhausted for a week after dealing with that parent or another parent. Over time, because you're learning to trust yourself or you're investing in yourself from a developmental standpoint, it's like, okay, my recovery time is now a day. My recovery time is now 3 days versus a week. So that's what resiliency looks like. That's what it looks like to start building. That's what it looks like to start building your capacity. You're staying open, right? When we're open, we're not letting or allowing yesterday to dictate how we show up today. Like things are supposed to be hard. It's not going to always be easy. So it's more of a mentality shift than anything. So I would say it's that part. And then I get into mental capacity, but I continue to say with people carrying so much weight, it feels like a mental load, but it's a mental load because we haven't truly addressed the emotional component of it.
Okay. So some things that I'm walking away with is pay attention to yourself. So you mentioned with the resiliency, paying attention to or being aware of the changes in the time that it takes you to kind of bounce back from
Mm-hmm.
situations. Okay. And then not expecting things to be easy because, as you stated, things are supposed to be hard. So I guess once we accept the fact that things are going to be hard and we deal with whatever the emotion is, I guess that is tied to that, then it seems like that might even affect the resiliency. I might be able to bounce back
Yeah.
quicker because I I'm accepting that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because
Okay.
your mental health, even when you think about your mental health, right, it includes struggle, it includes hard days, it includes big emotions, and all of that still counts as healthy, right? I always say it is when we talk about capacity, I think about it from the standpoint your capacity to be human without checking out, shutting down, or spiraling, right? So when I talk about I say emotional awareness, of course, like you need to figure out if you need to feel it, learn from it, or act on it. But the other part is being emotionally regulated. And most people think it's about feeling calm. No, it's more about what's happening in internally. If you appear professional, but your nervous system perceives this parent that is going off about their child as a threat because your heart is racing, you're furious, and when you walk away, you just got to scream. You're not emotionally regulated.
Mm,
Most people think about emotional regulation from the standpoint of being calm, appearing calm. I was able to stay composed.
mm. You've given us a lot to think about tonight. Just thinking about building capacity, thinking about what it takes for us to bounce back, thinking about accepting that things are not always going to be easy, that we're not always going to be comfortable, thinking about I guess the things that we need to do as leaders within the building, how to help teachers and support them in this journey as well. I think there are probably some systems that need to be maybe put in place. I'm not sure. Have you, I know that you are starting to work with schools and things like that. Are there any things that come to mind for you for systems that could be put in place within schools that could help teachers in this regard?
So one of the things that I gave last week when I did the workshop, I talked about 3 steps to build your emotional capacity, right? One we've already talked about, which is sitting with discomfort. This is when you can recognize your emotion without labeling it as bad. Can I allow this without needing it to change? The second thing is when you've identified that emotion without making a judgment, don't externalize it, right? Avoid making others responsible for how you feel. Like this parent made me angry. No, the parent didn't make you angry. It's more so I feel angry instead of you made me. Because I mean it's no different from the school board or a law is changing. So now I'm furious, whatever it may be, right? Is this emotion about the person or what it activated in me is what I tell people. You don't externalize because what ends up happening is one, you're no longer responding, you're reacting, which takes away from the emotional awareness and the emotional regulation because you're all bent out of shape and you're responding to external situations and or circumstances. And the other thing I tell people is resist the urge to try and fix whatever's happening immediately, right? For example, maybe that teacher defaults to, you know what, I'm just going to go home at 2:40 every day. Discomfort is information, is not an emergency. So what is
Mm.
this emotion here to teach me? Not what do I need to fix? And that's what people do because again, we want to feel better. We don't necessarily want to become better, but we want to feel better.
I'm going to take my notes from tonight and really process it to see how I can, as a coach, just show up for my teachers and help them to kind of build this capacity to learn to sit with that discomfort, to avoid making other people responsible, and to resist the urge to fix things immediately. I've really,
Mm.
really enjoyed this conversation because I think that it has given me some light bulbs and it's making me curious in a whole bunch of different ways. And I hope today's conversation gave the listeners some real tangible ways to think about their own growth and the growth of those around them. Capacity isn't just about doing more, it's about doing better, being smarter, and being more sustainable. Remember, you don't have to be perfect to make progress. You can start small, stay consistent, and don't be afraid to take ownership of your journey. If today's episode resonated with you, I want you to take a moment to rate and review the show and share it with a colleague who's already ready to build their capacity. I'll see you next time where we'll continue to discuss how to create the conditions for true growth to happen. Until then, keep leading, keep learning, and keep showing up for yourself and your students. That's a wrap for this episode of PD for the Soul. But before you go, don't forget to grab your copy of Season 2's Digital Companion Journal and Coloring Book. It's designed to help you slow down, process what you're hearing, and bring more intention to how you show up in and out of the classroom. Whether you're reflecting poolside or in between PD sessions, this is your space to reset with purpose. And if you want to catch me live this summer, I'll be at Hive in Orlando, Florida from July 14th to 17th, and I'll be facilitating Summer PD in Cumberland County during the last week of July. Ready to learn and you want to learn with me? Come check us out, okay? If you want more details and more soul-fueled support, make sure you're subscribed to the newsletter. You'll get all the updates, resources, and behind-the-scenes looks delivered straight to your inbox. And as always, when you hear something that resonates with you, don't be shy. Share it with a colleague. Take some time to rate us so that you can get us in front of more people so we can share more of what we're doing here together. As always, I appreciate you for taking the time to engage with me, okay? And I hope that you got something from today's episode. Until next time, keep making math happen.